What's going on, everybody? I'm your boy Retro Bliss, and you are on Retro Bliss Rewind. Welcome to the show. If you're watching from Mike's Gaming Gala, it's being simulcasted over there. Um, we are going to have a good show tonight. We're going to be talking about video game nostalgia. Now, we've done a show on nostalgia before, but this is going to be a little different take on it. So, without further ado, let's bring in our guest, Mike from Mike's Gaming Gala. We're starting new software today. Sorry, guys. And Brian from BD Retro Mods. What's going on, fellas?
There we go. Forgot I was doing it.
That's
hey, Brian.
Okay. Yeah. Long story, guys. Hopefully next week will be a little bit smoother. But anyway, we're going to try to get Mr. Postall in here a little bit later, but we had some technical difficulties, and so he's going to try to get his sound together. And then once we do that, we'll have him on the show. So, guys, nostalgia. It's kind of why we do what we do. As far as like,
it's a big part of it for sure.
What's your take on how nostalgia affects you? Let's talk about. You want to talk about maybe the collecting aspect of it first, or what do you want to start with?
Well, I mean, it kind of is part of everything. It helps dictate what we buy, what we feel like we got this fear of missing out for, what we collect, what we want. And it's a little bit different for everybody. And sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad. And especially the rose-colored glasses aspect of it, which is, and it goes both ways. There are games from childhood that you may hate that aren't that bad, but for whatever reason you hated them as a kid, and they're actually pretty good games, or at least playable. Case in point would be you, Phil, with Pac-Man 2600. You've even said it's not a bad game, it's just a terrible port and you want your money back. And that's based on your childhood experiences.
Right.
And it goes the other way. There are definitely games, and I've brought a couple of games here from my childhood where you love them, but objectively now, when you take a look at them, they're really not that great.
Right. Well, it's another reason why I like homebrew so much. It's not because the games that are ported over, or not homebrews. Well, homebrews, yeah, but like homebrew ports specifically, or redos of games that were already done on the 2600 or on from another system. Like for the 2600, for the graphics, they're not going to be as good as, like, say, the arcade versions and whatnot. But to me, I use the nostalgia to take me back to where I was when I was a kid, up in my room with my little 13-inch black and white television. And what if I had that game back then, and how I would have reacted and how I would have played back then. And so, I mean, obviously
certainly a lot of homebrew was driven by that.
Right. So I'm I'm a big homebrew guy now that I'm into retro collecting, but like nostalgia's what got me back into retro collecting to begin with, because pre-COVID, all I had was a PlayStation 3 and about 10 games. And then when we all got cooped up, I was perusing through YouTube, and I saw some flashback units where it had Atari 2600 games. I had never seen one before, and I'm like, oh man, I could get one of these and play some of the old games without having a new console and whatnot. And so one thing led to another. I got one of those and a Retron 77. Then I started collecting carts, and then the rest is history. But absolutely. Now, how does it affect you as far as like how you approach your collections? Like, because like a lot of this stuff, I had a 2600 growing up, and I had an 800 XL growing up, but I didn't have, say a ColecoVision or an Intellivision or anything like that. Do you still consider nostalgia a big part of your collecting, even though you may or may not have had one of those?
So, for instance, I was a 2600 kid, and then we went right to the NES in '89. Believe it or not, it was way after the NES had come out. Um, so 2600 NES, then SNES, and then we did get a Nintendo 64. But then my brother and I, we went and we bought a PlayStation. Um, so I've got nostalgia for certain systems for sure. But like you, I never had an Intellivision. I'm a big Intellivision guy now. Uh,
Mhm.
I never had a ColecoVision. Now that I have a controller from BD Retro Mods that lets me play it properly, I love the ColecoVision. I never had a Master System. I had a friend with a Master System. I had a friend with a Genesis. So there is some nostalgia in there. But one thing that's big, like I'm not nostalgic for the Jaguar, for instance. However, I remember seeing ads for the Jaguar, and I
Mhm.
remember seeing like magazine ads. I never knew anyone that had it, but I wanted one so bad by seeing the screenshots and seeing the ads and all that. So there is a nostalgia there. I've always been a fan of the oddball stuff, and a part of it is because I never like I saw ads for the Virtual Boy, and I've got it now. And honestly, like there's a couple good games on it. It's not the worst, but it's by no means great. But I am nostalgic for wanting it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yep. And with that, I think a lot of it is really kind of like what's already kind of been said. It's what you grew up with, So like that first machine you got,
That's where it
I
starts for sure.
that's where it starts. Because like our conversation here, a couple weeks ago with the Odyssey, like you guys have a lot of nostalgia for that, and whereas like for me, I'm like, I mean, I don't hate it, but I don't like pull it
I've
out
got
every day.
zero nostalgia for the Odyssey. I didn't know it existed until I was in
Right.
my
I mean,
20s.
right. But I mean, it's just so like those type of things where my first console was the Intellivision too. And like I love Burger Time to death. I mean, I still play Burger Time on it.
It's a
But
fantastic
it's a
version.
fantastic version. But there's a lot of games though on the Intellivision I go back to, and I'm just like, okay, carry on, back to Burger Time or back to Beauty and the Beast. I mean, and I think that's where some of this stuff sometimes is better left in nostalgia, not necessarily coming back to play it. And I'm kind of jumping ahead now, but because I will say for myself, when it comes to retro gaming, I like to stay within the 8-bit, 16-bit realm. So when you're talking
When
like
there
the
were
jet,
still pixels and not polygons.
correct, because the reality is, and people are going to hate me for this comment, but like I go back to the Nintendo 64 and I'm just like, man, a lot of these games are really rough and these aren't as awesome as I remembered them. And it's just because that was that first realm of 3D graphics and everything else, and it just did not look good. Just like regular PlayStation.
Yeah,
2D games are beautiful on it, but you get into that first generation of 3D graphics, it just does not age well. And it's like at the time it was amazing because we didn't know any better, but it's just going back, it's like I kind of ruined my nostalgia at that point. I'm like, oh, I thought this was
yeah.
great.
And Mr. Baseman agrees with you. The Nintendo 64 is far from a bad system. But
Oh,
I
right.
completely agree with you that the early 3D stuff um, is rough. It's rough on the Saturn. It's rough on the
Yep.
PlayStation. It's rough on the 64. Um, Even I would say some of the early PlayStation 2 stuff, it really doesn't cut it for me.
Right.
Um,
No, because one prime example, like I played it so much when the PlayStation 2 first came out, was Kessen. Like I thought that
yeah,
was such an amazing game. Just the whole graphics of what felt like real-time feudal Japan war, and it was just like, wow, this is nuts. And again, you go back and try to play it now, it's like, yep.
and you know what I've noticed over the years, and I consider this now whenever I watch a review for a new game or anything. Whenever they're touting the graphics over everything else, like look how amazing this looks. that game will not age well.
Right.
Because graphics never keep up. Now, granted, the leaps and bounds between systems and generations are becoming smaller and smaller as more polygons are there. But if the gameplay is what they're praising, it's far more likely to do well. I have a lot of great nostalgic memories of the Nintendo 64. First of all, Nintendo 64 came around when I was starting to get girlfriends and stuff, so that's just a happy point in my life anyway. But
Had them over for some Mario Party, huh?
That's right. But I have 5 younger brothers. We were a family of 8. And so a console that came out that was just built in 4-player, just plug in the things. There's no team tap or anything like that. And a lot of games supported it. I will die on this hill. Mario Kart 64 is still awesome, and it still plays awesome. Believe it or not, Star Fox 64 as a multiplayer game still plays awesome. It's a lot of fun. Another one, and Mario Party and Super Smash Brothers, they all did, they were all fantastic. But there's one game that we played, and we probably played it more than all those others combined.
GoldenEye.
That ages really poorly, and that's GoldenEye.
Yep.
And it's because of the single analog stick. And that's one of those things. I used to absolutely own grenade launchers in the caves, because you would go to that one. I would go to that one section. I once won. It was like all 3 of them trying to get me. And I won like 90 kills to 0 because I got in there. You get the grenade launcher, and you could guard the 2 entrances to the cave, and you just like bounce it off the wall, 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 and nobody can get in. And I'm so nostalgic for that. It was so much fun as a kid playing with my brothers, playing with my friends. But the game, you pick it up and it's almost unplayable now.
And I agree, because I was in college at the time when that was out, and we had so much fun with GoldenEye. But to your point,
you were in college in 97?
I think that came out in 99.
You're only a year older than me.
97? No, I guess okay, no, I got my year wrong. So I started college in 98. So
okay, I started in 99.
Yeah, so but yes, I think I was off there a little bit, but I don't know why I thought that came out later, but no,
because you probably played it a lot in college, though.
Right? Well, we did, because it was huge. Yeah. But same with like Turok. I love Turok on Nintendo 64. But again, you go back to play the straight original version, it's just like, it's just,
I find it more playable than GoldenEye, only because you don't have to be as quick with the moving your view.
Yep.
And something, nostalgia doesn't have to be something necessarily when you were a kid either, because I know I got my Master System when I was a newlywed, and I guess I had about maybe 15 games for it or whatnot. I can't remember now. And then after I had kids, I was into PC gaming, but got them in a Super Nintendo and a PlayStation, and I can remember sitting down and playing those games that we did have with my boys. And even though it wasn't really my system, and I was an adult, with a job and bills and trying to raise kids and whatnot, I still have fond memories of those particular systems because they were in the house, and that's what I did play.
You got to enjoy them with your kids.
So nostalgia isn't necessarily something that you have to have when you're a kid. It's something that you can have when, it's all it is a fond memory of something in times past. So
absolutely. I am very nostalgic for the Wii U because I used to play that with my boys all the time.
Yep. Right. See? Yep. So, I think we had a pretty decent library of Super Nintendo games, and man, we would just, but like when I was living at home, I can remember we were talking, Mike knows this because I've mentioned this on my live streams before, but the M Network sports games, I used to
Yeah.
play. I used
Mhm.
to. I was like almost 3 years older than my brother, and I would kick his butt half the time. You know, and
Well, and you look at, so we've got the Intellivision Gamer. He commented earlier. I don't know if he's still here, but I don't know if you guys know this about Casey, but he is like a world class MLB baseball player. He's been playing it ever since he was a little kid. He's memorized, what button to press to get what fielder to get what. I watched him mop the floor with pretty much everybody at Portland 2 years ago. And the fact of the matter is, and he's like, Mike, play. First of all, I've only played MLB baseball like 3 times. And the reason I've only played about 3 times is because although at the time it was a premium baseball game compared to what you were playing on the 2600 at the time, it's still not a great baseball game, in my opinion. Like, it's okay. But I've got zero nostalgia
gamer
for it.
aimer.
Yeah, Gamer Aimer's here.
Yeah, I was gonna say, hey,
Gamer
it's
aimer.
good to see you in the chat. I wish I
Boy,
could type in the chat, but we're using a new software tonight, and I haven't figured out how I can actually reply in the comments over here. So, but it's good to see you on there. So,
But you look at, and it's like, okay, here's one. It would not be a proper podcast about nostalgia if Mike didn't piss off half the viewers. So let's talk about nostalgia and rose-colored glasses. There is a game on the NES that every kid I knew loved. I loved. Absolutely loved. That is almost unplayable now, unless you know what you're doing. And it's a Legend of Zelda. Who knows to bomb the right bush or set fire to the right bush or whatever? If you don't have a player guide, even back then, you weren't getting anywhere. Right? Right? It's true, though. It's true. You and I could beat this with our eyes closed, Brian. Maybe not Phil.
I didn't
he
have
was
an
an adult
N64.
when this came out.
No, and I didn't play Zelda
This
for it.
is an NES game. But,
NES.
no,
I didn't. I haven't played that one either, if I'm being honest.
Exactly. And if you didn't know what you were doing, you can't play this game. You have to know. Even back in the day, you found a friend that had Nintendo Power that showed you where you had to go and what you had to do. And then it's fantastic. You've got these memories, and it is a great game. It's just not playable unless you already are told what to do. Now, by the time it gets to this, it's awesome.
Yeah.
For everybody.
That's my favorite Zelda right there.
This is my favorite Zelda of the entire, like, a lot of people say Ocarina of Time. I love Ocarina of Time, but this is the premium Zelda, in my opinion.
But I will say, though, and again, a lot of people won't like this comment, but I really liked Zelda 2, and I know a lot of people did not like that one. But I never really liked it. I actually liked it. I didn't mind that one. But
it's not a bad game. It's just such a departure.
It is a departure, for sure. But an interesting point, though, I think Jolt made was about how the 2600 nostalgia fueled him in the retro game collecting. Yep. But then it also intrigued him with like the 7800. And I fully agree, Jolt, because, I mean, you're going to laugh at me on this one. Like, I didn't even know the 7800 even existed for the longest time. It was literally when I decided to go back and get 2600 carts. I got this giant lot, like a box full, because they were just clearancing them out, and like going through the carts, I had one, and it's like, oh, it's not working in my 2600, and obviously because it's a 7800 cart.
7800.
And like, what in the world is a 7800? So I literally had to look it up. I mean,
yeah, and it's the same like what I was saying with just being attracted to the oddball stuff. At the time they came out, I did not know about the Intellivision. I did not know about the 5200. I did not know about the 7800. I didn't know about the Odyssey 2. I knew about the ColecoVision, I knew about the Vectrex, and I knew about the Master System.
Yeah, and again, you guys all know my TI-99 story. That's even more hilarious. So I mean, not
This
knowing what the
cannabis kid has it right. He didn't use a strategy guide for Legend of Zelda. He made 3 wishes with the Game Genie.
you don't need a Game Genie for that game, but yeah, I mean, it's just because to your point, I was in television too, and then my aunt had the Atari 2600, and then from there it was going to the NES, like most of us, and then from there just kind of worked the way up.
Yep.
But I will say nostalgia has given me interest in looking at other things like the 7800, which I love the 7800, um, and the Master System. I mean, again, just systems that if you didn't have Nintendo's monopolization at the time, we might have
Yep.
saw a whole different atmosphere there. But and even TurboGrafx 16, I never had one growing up, but man, I love playing the TurboGrafx 16 now.
And
So
that's and you're making a good point because and it's the same kind of thing as what Joel was saying. Nostalgia not only drives what we collect, it's a gateway drug. It's
yes,
like
it
I'm a
is.
big history guy, and I always refer to World War II as the gateway drug because the World War II is what every, especially middle-aged white guys, what we all go to, and it's like, oh, that's so interesting. But it's a gateway to what I think is even more interesting. World War I, Civil War, American Revolution, English Civil War, Roman times. Like, just it's a gateway to everything else because it's something that draws you.
Yeah, I think another way of putting it too, or another way to look at it is that your nostalgia memories are just basically those points in time. Like I'll give you an example. I had, fond memories of my 2600. I had an 800 XL. But then after that, I went almost straight into PC gaming. And
Oh, I
so
thought you were going to make the joke. I okay, Phil, forgive me, because you were an adult after the 2600 and your 800 XL, right? So I
yes.
thought you were going to make the joke. It's like I didn't go to the NES; I went to sex.
Well, that too, but anyway,
But
you know what they
yeah,
say about
anyhow,
Pokemon, don't you? It leads to a dog's life. Okay, anyway, I hope my wife's not watching. So
Our wives
anyway, what
don't
I was
watch
going to
this.
say, I had the nostalgia for my 2600, my 800, and then I did have a Master System for a time, like I said, when I first got married. But I almost right after that, I went right into PC gaming, and so I have much nostalgia for a lot of older Windows 95 um, PC games. But I use those points in between to fill in the collecting that I do now for things like the Intellivision and the ColecoVision and the Odyssey 2 and all that stuff. I use my points of reflection and my nostalgia. I fill in the gaps now with my collecting for those other consoles because I never had them, and then it makes me think, man, it kind of would have been nice to have this at home instead of the 2600 or and so even though I might not have nostalgia specifically for something, I would definitely have a fondness for it and wish that, man, I wish I could have had one of those back then. And so now when I collect for these other systems. And so I love the Intellivision. I love the Odyssey 2. I love the ColecoVision. All these things that I never had as a kid, but I use my nostalgia for the other things as kind of
A springboard.
yeah, to the
Mhm.
other, like you said it by the word gateway. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Well, and I think with that too, that's where we also got to be careful when it comes to nostalgia because a lot of things out there, as much as we all love it, there's also things out there that like to take advantage of it too. And
Yeah, we've talked
um,
about that recently too.
yeah, and and I'm guilty of it because
Because
wood grain
everybody
craft.
has to pour
I
their
mean,
whiskey with an Atari decanter and
yeah, right.
have their Atari energy drinks, and
Yep.
then Yeah.
It does help you be a better player. They said so themselves.
If Atari says it, it's true.
But again, to that point though, it's like like every time we see wood grain, right? Like it makes people go, and I'm guilty of it because like just
Wood grain
sitting here,
sexy.
here we go, Retron 77. I already had.
That's orange wood grain.
That's
Doesn't
not
count.
real.
It's not.
But they
it's
tried.
Not, they tried, and the thing
They
was,
barely
like,
tried. Retron in the looks department. Retron 77 barely tried.
And
that's a good looking console.
Well, I don't disagree.
Mine's a brick, but it's good looking.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have much going for it, but and then of course, because I needed another 2600 to play 2670.
Of course,
stuff, right? And then last but not least, I had to get it. The Super Pocket, the limited edition with the wood grain. I had to get it.
And you're like every other Atari fanboy these days. You got, and I'm not necessarily calling you a fanboy, but there are those that they've got to get everything that they can get that comes out from Atari, regardless of whether it's good or not. And it's all based on nostalgia, and Atari has survived on this nostalgia because they keep, if I'm being honest, they keep rehashing and reselling the same old, and just put a different package on it and calling it something else. But it's the same stuff we've had.
Yeah, without a doubt. And the thing is sometimes some of it's good, but there's other times where it's garbage. And I mean, it's truly a money grab for pulling on someone's nostalgia strings. I mean,
unfortunately, there's a lot of that.
Right.
And at the end of the day, I mean, if you're paying your bills and you want to get something that I think is stupid, who am I to say what you can buy, right? Like, that's totally fine, and I don't have a problem with it. What I don't like is when it is just that really obvious cash grab. Like, cater to my nostalgia, but don't take advantage of it.
Correct.
Has always been my kind of approach to it. But I am not the guardian of what is good and what isn't. I'll be completely honest. That Atari decanter does look pretty cool. I'm not going to spend my money on it, but that is a much better purchase than the energy drink crap.
Yes and no, because I'm just waiting for someone after pouring a few drinks, like they somehow hit it, or the long stem on it, and they're going to snap that in half somehow.
Well, drink responsibly.
But yeah, so I mean, it's just, I don't know. I mean, again, to each their own. Like, by all means, buy what you want to buy. But there's been a lot, like when we talk about Atari specifically, there's definitely been a lot of things lately where it's just like, really, some of the stuff's really good. Like this is pretty cool. If you don't already have something like this,
if you don't already have 45 different ways of playing it, yes,
correct. I mean, but I mean, it is a nice way to play, and obviously the 2600 plus, and now again giving us the 7800 plus, which is the exact same thing, different shell. But hey, let's see if we can get people to buy it yet again. And
if you'll recall in our 7800 plus episode, I didn't have a problem with the fact that they're releasing the same thing again. I had a problem with them releasing it before making the 2600 plus do everything that they promised it would do.
Correct. Have an actual
and I even said in it, release the 2600 Heavy Plus, release the Vader Plus, release the Junior Plus. I don't care. Just make sure that what you release works and does what it's supposed to do without a community beta build. That said, my favorite nostalgia is the nostalgia that you can keep from the actual item you had as a kid. Or back as a thing. Like my Atari, I've got great nostalgia for Maze Craze, Combat, Outlaw, even though Outlaw really isn't that great in hindsight. I remember telling my kid, I hyped this up to my kids so much, and then they were just like, really, Dad?
Dad, what is that piece of garbage?
Space Invaders, now this one does hold up.
Yep.
And Berserk, right? But none of these are my original games. Correct. We just had the cartridges, and my dad sold them in a garage sale in the late 90s. But this right here, Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh
Go
no,
ahead. Go ahead.
well, because it was a different mindset then, which is partly why we have the collectability we have now with stuff.
Yeah.
Because I mean, again, it was to be able to get the next console, you ultimately had to sell everything you had so you could afford to get the next one. And I mean, I was guilty of that clear up till like Sega Saturn, which finally after that I was getting my own income and was able to keep my actual childhood, or not, well, it wasn't childhood at that point, but
Yeah.
teenager college consoles, but prior to that, it's like once PlayStation came out, I remember I gave up all my Sega Genesis, Sega CD stuff, which now really sucks. I had a lot of those working design ones because those were real cheap back in the day, on clearance all the time. But I mean,
Here's
again,
here's a little bit of history, and this is a pretty famous game, and this is my childhood copy. Childhood, I mean, I was a teenager, like you say. This was like 93 or 94 we got this. And despite the fact that it is terrible, and it is famous because it's terrible, you can see that we played the absolute heck out of it because I've got elastic bands and the old dried tape thing because these shells were so brittle. But Action 52 for the NES. With Cheetah Man, we played. I remember my brothers and I going through every single one, finding out what games were playable. There's one or two of them where you like click on the game and it won't even take you into the game. And there's some that are just like not playable, and the rest of them mostly suck. Well, actually, I think all of them suck. But we played the heck out of it, and therefore, to this day, I like this. I like the games on here. They are objectively terrible, but I like them because I've got that rose-colored glasses. My brothers and I sitting down and spending half of our gameplay session just trying to find a game that was playable.
Well, yeah, I mean, again, it's all those memories like that, which, it's a shame. Like, you don't, I mean, now we're going to sound like old folks, but, it's just
We
like,
are.
but, but I mean,
I am anyway.
But I mean, my own son, what he plays now, it's all online, it's like, you don't have
Yep.
those times where, you had the sleepover and, the pizza laying there trying to sit there together, play some multiplayer games or, different things like that on,
My
that
kids
just,
still do.
well, that's good. I mean, but it's just, I mean,
And they'll be nostalgic, and it's funny because so gamer Aimer here. Gamer Aimer is younger than us. I imagine she's nostalgic for the Nintendo 64, maybe the Super Nintendo. I don't know actually how old she is. I just know she's younger than we are. My kids are going to be nostalgic for the Wii U and the Switch.
Mhm.
And everything in between. Some of our viewers, they might be nostalgic for the PlayStation 2. They might be nostalgic for the original Magnavox Odyssey. We've got a range, and it does tend to skew a little older. But regardless of what you're nostalgic for, I do think having it as that gateway to what else was there. And you can also be anti-nostalgic. If you were, let's say you were a big part of that Sega Genesis, Super Nintendo battle back in the day, right? And you're a big Genesis fan. You probably hate the Super Nintendo. Last year, we had this one guy that kept coming on our podcast every once in a while and commenting. It's like, yeah, so Super Nintendo sucks, right? So Super Nintendo was awesome, but he was still clearly, and I guarantee you it's childhood trauma. He was still fighting that battle, right? It's like the Japanese soldier that's stranded on that one island, and they find him in the 60s and he doesn't know the war's over.
Right? He fell for the advertisement. Genesis does what Nintendo don't.
Well, but with that,
which is fine, but he's like, you grow up now and you look back and you have a bias against something just because it was what you fought with kids at school about.
But I will say though, I mean, again, sounding old, but I think that was the best time of gaming, like during the Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis run, because
The
there
early
was,
90s, yeah.
I mean, there was just so much competition there. Where I mean, I started with a super, like, I think I went in reverse order. I ended up getting a Super Nintendo first because I'm like, I gotta have Super Mario World. Like, I saw it in the Sears wish book, catalog thing, and it
Yeah.
was just like, oh man, I gotta have Super Mario World. And so I started there, but then, like, then I got the Genesis after that, and I really liked where Sega was taking more risks with their games. Like, you had a lot more what I feel unique games, where Super Nintendo wasn't bad. Like, I love both. I mean, I wasn't like the
And
one
both of them
camper.
had that
Yes.
was really the first console era that had just this glut of sports games.
Oh, yeah, you did. But look, you had Sega making their own, and then EA making
Yeah,
them,
and then
and
you had the
yeah,
NHL series.
yeah.
Yeah.
But no, I do think that was one of the golden times of it all, just because there was a lot more, you know, uniqueness there, because that competition was so strong. Where I don't feel like you see that competition anymore. And I'm not saying games today are bad, but it's just like anytime a big name game comes out, it's coming out on both Xbox and PlayStation.
It's certainly gotten less. I think the last
Yes.
generation where at least the two main, like, you can argue that Nintendo is a main competitor. I mean, they won a couple of the last generations, but you like, if you're looking at PlayStation, Xbox, the last time they were truly different, unique systems was PlayStation 2 and original Xbox, in my
Yep.
opinion. Yes, they had some exclusives. You can't play Halo on the PlayStation. You can't play Last of Us on the Xbox. But with the exception of just a handful of games you'd even care to play, um, is negligible.
Yeah, I mean, Poe is right. It's like he's saying that someone playing an old game for the first time says it's bad, but to us, we just loved it. But that's because that's what we had back then. And even though, like Mike said, in some respects they don't hold up today, uh,
But
we
at the
still
same time, I think Gamer Aimer, coming from the other thing, appreciating that that's the
Right.
origin of what you have now.
Yeah.
right. And
If
those
it
are those
wasn't
Yeah.
points
for,
in
yeah.
time where your nostalgia, you like you were saying about World War II, it can take you back to World War One or the Revolutionary War, and that's kind of what's doing it for her. She knows what she's nostalgic for, but she's not afraid to go back and go, hey, and like she said, this is without these older systems, we wouldn't have what we have now. So there is history involved, and you can appreciate it, and I get that.
Yeah, like, you look at Atari, and you look at what the gaming landscape was there, and it's completely different to what it is now. But all the lessons were learned in that generation. That's
Hmm.
why Nintendo became the way they were. They had the officially licensed carts and
Yep.
lockout chips. That's you had the first third-party publishers. It's not only the origin of a popular game system, but it's the origin of an industry and how that industry works. Both learning from Atari's successes and failures.
Mhm.
But for sure, and I said this on a previous podcast, and got a lot of backlash for it. But objectively, and this is not to say that this is for all modern games, but games now are better than they were then. Not because of lack of creativity or lack of thing, but because that toolkit becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. Maybe a better way to phrase it is, games have the potential to be better now than they were then. One of the biggest things missing from the Atari 2600 library, at least, there's a few games that have it, but music, and
Mhm.
how big of a game changer. Like, for Gyrus on the 2600, the graphics are absolutely terrible, but that game still, I gave a good review because they put that effort to put the music in there. If you don't have Bach, you're not playing Gyrus. Um, and little things like that as it grows.
Mm-hmm. No, for sure, and I think with that too, with no,
It
you're
actually,
right,
and
Carl.
as
Yep.
he's saying, sorry, I'm going to bring that back up. As he's saying, with ET is the worst game ever, and I know I'm going to piss off one person here. I am sick and tired of the echo chamber that has succeeded that, which is Pac-Man 2600's worst game ever. It's far from it.
Neither one
Anybody
of
who
them
says
are.
that either of those two games are the worst game ever needs to play a heck of a lot more video games.
And for the record, I never said it was. As a matter of fact, I did a top 10 worst
Bottom
games
10.
ever, and those two games came in as honorable mentions only because of their them being famous for being so bad. But to me, they don't even come close to being in the top 10. Not at all. Now, are they great games? No, but they're like I said, Pac-Man 2600 is playable.
Yeah.
So is ET. You just got to understand kind of how to play. If you don't understand how to play, it's going to be bad because you
Exactly.
just
I can beat ET in like 10 minutes.
right.
Once you know
And
what you're doing, it's not a difficult game at all. It's an
no.
annoying game. It doesn't like it's certainly not a good game, but it is not a terrible game. I actually prefer ET to Raiders of the Lost Ark, and I know Raiders of the Lost Ark gets a lot of love for whatever
Yeah,
reason.
yeah, I don't.
I've
Yeah,
never cared for it.
Yeah, I never cared for Raiders of the Lost Ark either. But and again, but I also would not say ET was a fun game. I'm not saying it was the worst.
No, I won't go that far.
But
It wasn't fun, but it's
right,
playable and it doesn't suck.
right. But no, I mean, so where we kind of, I think it's probably a good point to talk. When we think about nostalgia, I think this is where
I'm a big enough man to show this comment. Chris Walker disagrees.
again,
Pac-Man 26, and you know what? I will admit to my nostalgia, rose-colored glasses. Pac-Man 2600 is the first way I ever played Pac-Man.
But yeah, no, I mean, yeah, Pac-Man, I'm hit and miss on that. Like I said, I don't think it's terrible, but it's definitely. I think
It's a terrible port.
Yes,
I will grant that. I'll never argue that.
Yeah, it's a terrible port. Like if they would have called it something else, like I don't know, Poco Man, people probably wouldn't have cared, but at the end of the day, everyone like had, again, when you think about the glasses, like everyone expected this like true arcade port on the Atari, and that just wasn't happening to begin with. And it's just there was such a Pac-Man craze that people just but
kids still played it though.
Fever.
They still kept it and they still played it. I mean, they had some returns on that, I'm sure, but I know I kept mine, and even though I was upset about it, I did play it. I did play it.
But no, I mean the other thing though with nostalgia that I think is important, and you kind of hit on it a little bit, but probably even more now would just be, it's nostalgia that's given us all these homebrew games and like all these other products where, like for instance, like I mean, someone else in the chat might be excited for this one too, but like I got an order from Limited Run Games today, and it had my NES version of Rugrats, the brand new Rugrats game for the NES. Like I'm excited to play it because it's just graphically, it looks like an NES Capcom game, where it's just like, I don't know. I'm excited to pop that one in and give it a roll.
Capcom was one of the kings of the NES. I'll give
right.
you that. Capcom and Konami.
Right. Then I picked up another one here the other day by a new group that's using the Tengen title, and it's just like I think I forget what it's called, Zed and something. I forgot to bring it up, but it's another homebrew I got that I'm looking forward to play on the NES. And
and imagine your nostalgia being so powerful that not only do you buy and play new games, you make new games.
Yeah, right.
And that's incredible. Guys like John Champeau, guys who publish and support the scene like Michael Thomason, it's 100% nostalgia that's driving that. It's, oh man, I always wanted to make, I had this, when I was 8, I had this idea for an Atari game. And they go and they do it.
Right.
Cannabis Kid brings up Rob the Robot for the NES. I remember that being the coolest thing. I had a friend that had it. I played it. It was absolutely terrible.
Yeah.
But it was still cool.
Yeah, no, I had a friend that got like that for Christmas, got like that whole Nintendo set
Big set, yeah.
that came with all that. And again, it's a very awesome shelf piece, but that's about all I can say on
Yeah,
that.
I remember pressing the button. It's like just goes.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
oh, come on. I was
Right.
expecting it to talk to me like Johnny Five or
Yeah. No, I mean, it was definitely a gimmick and it didn't work. Kind of right up there with the Power Glove. I'd say around that era, probably the only quote unquote gimmick that kind of got it right was kind of the Sega 3D glasses, because that actually is really good. I mean, for its time. So
for its time, they made it a lot more wearable than the Vectrex did. But the Casey came for Frogger tips from Mike. Don't get run over by cars. It's my best tip.
But
that's a plug for the Retro Bliss Ninja contest, by the way.
That's right. I'm 2 for 2 on your Frogger competitions.
Yep. Very well done.
But then, we have companies, that are making, FPGA consoles and other different things, because of our nostalgia, like Analog's a
And
big
I
one.
put my money into that.
Yeah, I mean, Analog makes good stuff. And, one that I don't know that most are maybe excited about, but I kind of am, because again, nostalgia
Nintendo
wise,
64 one.
I do plan on getting one. I'm hoping.
I do plan on getting it.
Yeah.
I am really curious what the output of that looks like, because there's so much built-in dithering on the N64.
Yeah, and that's the thing. If they could really make it look better, because again, there are fun games that still hold up on it, but like I said, there's just a lot of 3D games that didn't do well. Now, Mario Kart, Diddy Kong Racing, different things like that were fine. Mario 64 was fine. It holds up. But I mean, there's just a lot that didn't. Now I'm just curious to see how that goes.
My brothers were really big into like the Banjo-Kazooie and the Donkey Kong Country 64, like the 3D things.
Yeah.
The only one I was really big into was Mario 64. Those ones.
Oh yeah. Oh, the Polymega, man, that thing's a pricey beast. And I don't know. I mean, I think it's a cool.
I like
concept.
my analog stuff. I'm happy with my analog stuff.
I like the idea of the Polymega, but like just the fact that it's all emulation at the price tag. I like the whole modular thing, but because when they were initially going to go FPGA, I was all for it. But then once they put the new price tags and then said they were just emulating, I'm like, yeah. But no, analog ones are big. But the one I was starting to say, because like I said, I have a lot of nostalgia for the Game Boy. That was one of those that, because you got to think, growing up at that time, you really only had one television in the house. So, the fact that you had a console that was like almost NES graphics, being able to play stuff just up in your bedroom, was great. And Chromatic, they're making a new Game Boy. And obviously you got the analog pocket out there, but what's cool about the Chromatic is like they're really getting it down to like being like the true Game Boy, with having a special built screen for it that actually replicates the exact pixel number of the Game Boy. It's backlit, but also allows you to be able to easily see it in the sunlight, for Game Boy and Game Boy Color. So it's just really cool. And it's an aluminum frame on it instead of plastic. So a lot of cool stuff there. I don't know, because of the analog pocket, how popular that's ultimately going to be, but like, I'm cool. I really like it. And I like the fact that they're bringing out new games for it then that also work on Game Boy or Game Boy Color. So,
because you posted that in our podcast Discord, and I remember looking at it and just like glancing at it and be like, oh, I've got the pocket, I'm good. But then when I clicked on, actually looked at the site, it was the games that interested me.
Yeah.
New games. And there's something about, and this is kind of swinging back, because I know we're in the last 10 minutes here, but this is kind of swinging back to almost what we started with. Like the reason when I want to play a game, I would say 8 times out of 10, not 9 times out of, but 8 times out of 10, I want to play something for an older system.
Mm-hmm.
But of those times, probably only 50% of the time do I want to play an original game. I usually want to play new stuff on that system.
Yes.
And that's a different kind of nostalgia. That's a nostalgia for the system, for the graphics, for the gameplay that you can expect from it, from the muscle memory of the controllers or whatever controls there are. Not necessarily for a specific game at a specific time. I love the original Super Mario Brothers. It is a fantastic game. It's an iconic game. It basically perfected how platformers should feel. But I've played it and beaten it a million times. I really don't want to play Super Mario Brothers again. I'm not a speedrunner. But if I'm playing new games that have not exactly, but that feel of playing a new Super Mario Brothers.
Yeah. And to that point, I think that's kind of where the nostalgia still plays in, because I'm with you on that. Like, obviously I have a PS5, I have a Series X, I got a Switch, but I find myself going to the Switch more than all of them. And
1000%.
with the modern
every time I
consoles,
turn my PS5 or Xbox Series X on, it needs an update, and it's like a 3-hour update because I
right.
haven't updated it in a month.
And with that, like, the games I enjoy are the ones that are pretty much homages to the 8-bit, 16-bit era, because again, this sounds old. They're just much simpler to play. And at the end of the day, when I want to sit down for some, a few hours and play a game, I just want it to be something simple and fun. I don't want to necessarily have to invest a couple hundred hours into it. Though I will
Unless
say
it's Fallout 4. I lost like a
Yeah.
year of my life to Fallout 4.
though I will say that might change after this week, because the Dragon Quest 3 remake's coming out, and I have a feeling I'm going to be sucked in on that for a little bit. So, but overall though, I mean, I like those simpler games where, again, it just brings back that nostalgia of the enjoyment I had during the 16-bit era playing stuff.
Not to mention the amount of time that you generally have to play as a parent, as an adult,
Right.
With a job. You come home, you've got half an hour to play something, an older styled, simple game. Like, I could sit down and play Berserk for 10 minutes, turn off, and have gotten my fix. Whereas if I'm playing Fallout 4, if I'm playing for 10 minutes, I've just loaded my game, right?
Right.
That said, if I've got 5 hours and I can choose to spend that 5 hours with Fallout 4 or with just Berserk, Fallout 4, that's going to keep me entertained for 5 hours. It's going to keep me entertained for 45 minutes. And then, okay, now, and that's why when you were a kid, you grabbed a stack of games from the shelf and you sat by your system and had a long cable TV, and you played this one for a half an hour, then you played this one for a half an hour, and then you played this for 45 minutes, then you played this maybe for 20 minutes. And that's a big part of it too.
For sure. So, I really believe that the nostalgia is what has fueled the popularity of the flashback units and all these little
100%.
clone systems. I mean, if it wasn't for nostalgia, those things wouldn't sell. People nowadays, if they have an Xbox Series X or Xbox One or a PlayStation 5 or whatever, why would they want to play those type of games if it wasn't for the nostalgia? So yeah, I mean,
And especially so analog targets, the hardcore nostalgia. The flashback units and anything with like built-in, they very wisely target the fair weather nostalgia. It's like, oh, I had an NES back in the day. Let's pick up this NES Mini and I'll play 30 of our games. And you know what? They play it for a couple weeks and then it sits.
Right.
And that's kind of what flashbacks are generally designed to be. I remember I was coaching one of my kids' hockey teams back in the day. And one of the parents found out that I was a retro game collector and all that stuff, he's like, "Oh, I got an Atari," as if that was impressive. And then one time, I think he had a big place, and so his one of the team parties was at his place, and he showed me his Atari, and it was one of the flashbacks. And like, that's what normal people get. We also have to understand that us, quite frankly, probably anybody that's watching, you're not normal. Most people aren't having big rooms full of games. Most people can't walk to their shelf and grab this 10 minutes before a show and be able to show stuff. I fully admit that I am not normal. And the Intellivision gamer is so far from normal, even further out than me. But like, none of us are. This is our passion. Right. This is something that we're really nostalgic about. For some people, it's music. I know people who, every time such and such artist comes to town, like every time Kiss comes to town, they've got to go to the Kiss concert. And if they're doing 3 nights, they're going to go all 3 nights. And that's their passion and their nostalgia. Ours are video games. And, for me, it's also movies. But it happens with everything. And it also, like, you have to understand that nostalgia does come with the rose-colored glasses. Mm-hmm. So whatever you're looking at, it's really hard to be unbiased about.
And it's also to have different opinions with it, because the thing is that, like nostalgia, well, like a lot of things, your taste can change. So what you thought was great initially, I mean, you've gone more fine dining of video gaming, and now you go back and it's just not the same as it used to be. And that's okay. I mean, it's just, the main thing with nostalgia is just, don't let it be taken advantage of. That's the key at the end of the day.
And also understand what it is. It's like, I love camping, right? And it's a more primitive, much like playing Atari. It's a primitive experience. It's something, that it's just, but you have to understand that, there's a reason people live in houses. We got air conditioning, we got heating and all this stuff. It's great to have. It's our origins. Love it. Play it all you want. But the same way that we would ask modern gamers to respect the origins, we as retro gamers should respect where video games have gone. And we could now respect most doesn't definitely mean we can't criticize it. Certainly doesn't mean we can't criticize it. Microtransactions are the bane of everybody's existence. Stuff like that. Online only is BS. But the storytelling, the music, the art of what video games have become, even as a retro gamer who plays 90% of the games he plays, probably predate half the viewers on YouTube. I respect where video games have gone, and I respect the artistry that goes into the good ones.
For sure. I took a step back when I went from PC gaming down to the retro, because, I was playing some pretty high graphic, heavy PC games prior to getting into the retro gaming, but it wasn't that I didn't appreciate the, what I had. It's just that I wanted to relive what I had, and that was because of the nostalgia. It just, bottom line, if I wouldn't have had the nostalgia for it, I wouldn't have give Atari the time of day.
Mm-hmm. And you wouldn't, like, if you didn't have nostalgia for it, you'd be missing out on some pretty special experiences.
True enough. I mean, I've seen videos where I've seen kids, that are used to playing these modern games, sit and have to play an Atari game, and they'll go, these suck. These are bad, and it might be a game that you might like. It's just, but to them, it's just not,
That I don't know. If you get them young enough, My youngest, when he was 4, used to come and ask me for Atari all the time. Because they were simple games, a 1-button joystick. Especially if you're a retro gamer and you've got young kids, you should start them with, like, before you give them a tablet, give them an Atari joystick.
Maury will not touch Atari 2600
But
games
because
at
she
all.
had the tablet first. If you had started her with that, she would have loved it.
Right,
But with that
right.
said, though, I will say though there's some experiences, when we say Atari specifically, like when you look at modern gaming, like we don't have a trackball for the PlayStation. We don't have paddle controllers for the PlayStation. So I mean, those are still experiences that are kind of unique to that time, and they're still really fun to play. I mean, I'll still play Kaboom until I'm blue in the face. I mean, it's great.
Like Casey says here, a fun game is a fun game.
Right. Yep. For
Yep.
sure.
So the gameplay of a lot of modern games come from the gameplay of the older
They're evolutions
games.
of
They
the
built a
original.
lot better.
Right. Right.
Yep.
So now there weren't too many like 3D games on a 2600. There were a few, but very, very not very
Tunnel
good
Runner.
But yeah, so I think it's been a good episode, a good subject to talk about.
And we should have said this at the start. Mr. Postal was supposed to be with us, but he's been having some technical difficulties.
Yeah, we did.
He's here in spirit. He's been in the chat a bit. I've showed some of those. But this was actually his topic idea. So
it was. Thank you, Poe.
We're sad that he couldn't have been on.
Yeah, we definitely wanted his take, and he did add to the show with his chat and whatnot, but it would have been nice to have him on. And so hopefully we can figure out what technical difficulties there were and fix them for next time. This is our first time using this particular software. So, but anyway, I appreciate, first of all, I've got to say this too. I want to.
Casey, all of us do.
Yeah, that's right. Stop it. Anyway, so I just want to say how much I appreciate Mike and Brian and Poe and everybody else who contributes to the Retro Bliss Rewind podcast. There's a lot that goes in behind the scenes. And I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. I wasn't sure if I was going to make it tonight or not. You just don't want to know.
Phil was at a wedding on a Tuesday. Who does that?
Well, the wedding was supposed to be at 2:30. They got a little bit of a late start, and then it was like everybody and their grandmother had to talk at this particular wedding, so we didn't. And then after that, it was at an old church in downtown Cincinnati. So after the wedding, they picked up all the chairs. They started setting up tables for the after party, and by the time they got that done and we sat down to eat, I had to text the guys, "Hey man, I don't know if I'm going to make it or not," and I barely did. I like within 5 minutes of the show coming on or so, 5-10 minutes, I was able to get on, but yeah, I didn't have a proper time to really figure things out, and I think that's one reason why
it's a good thing you wore that to the wedding.
Yeah, I did. If you guys are friends with me on Facebook, you'll see that I did. This is not what I wore. So anyway, I appreciate everybody being here and everybody watching. All of you who have watched from Mike's Gaming Gala. Poe may have simulcasted over on his channel. He talked about it. I don't know if he actually did or not. But I just want to say thanks again.
Yeah, that's what Retro Bro is commenting. He was asking if we were doing Rumble. No, some of the comments are coming from my channel. I simulcast.
Yes. So anyway, thanks everybody for being here. And with that, I think it's been a great show.
Yep.
So
all right.
We're ready to go
everybody.
out. I'm gonna let Mike do it.
I got it. I got it.
Yeah.
All right. Take care.